I think it's important to discuss about coordination. How do you do that? First element is, and it came from really our colleagues from the UN, but also NGOs. So it was just not ICRC or the Red Cross saying that. We're living in an environment where there's 2 or 3 things which are extremely striking. One, there is absolutely no political convergence at the international level to deal with conflict or to deal with global issues. And you know that very well. Look at Somalia, but look at South Sudan. Right? So, very clear message is this war, this conflict, sadly, will go on. I hope I'm wrong, but most likely it will go on. Most likely there will be no political solution, at least not in the coming months or years, and we need to be ready. That's very clear. We know there is possibly in the world a transition of power. Nobody knows exactly what will happen over the next 10 years. But what we know in the meantime, states at the highest level, they're not willing or not able to find solutions which will be able to really deal with global issues. Migration, economic crisis, climate change, violence, and the key word for the international community, and here I'm talking about North and South, not just North, globally, the key word seems to be containment. You contain the migrant there. You contain the poor there. You contain the pandemic, Ebola down there. Right? And you contain the conflict as much as you can. And if you look at all the strategy, they are very much about containment, including the military strategy, the security strategy. So we have to think what it means for us and what it means for the people. So that's one heavy feature. The second features which are very clear is the fact that we are in a world where trust has become a very rare commodity. And it is very clear around the world. Again, this is something which you see. Trust between communities, between people and institutions. And we feel it. I know that here in Kenya you're fighting hard to make sure that the Kenyan Red Cross gain the trust of the people. But this is something you have to demonstrate every day. In a world where people will also tell me it's not because you are the Red Cross or the Red Crescent that what you do is good. Show me. Prove me that what you do is good. Right? And prove it to me. Not just to my community or to other places. So the fact that we are moving in a world which is a prove-it world is something which I think we have to accept that, but it's a challenging. So it's nice to claim that we are perfect, almost, that we collaborate very well, that we are neutral, impartial, independent. People want to see that on a daily basis, linked with their own experience. And it's true for politicians, for economic sectors, for military. You can see that across the board. It's very true in this country, by the way, as well. And of course, and that's the third features, it's complex in a world which is on one hand is extraordinarily globalized, but also extraordinarily fragmented. And this is something we together we need to capture. Globalized in the sense that despite of the world in which we operate, I mean, due mainly not only due to the fact that you have mobile phone everywhere. I'm traveling everywhere, you too. I see mobile phone over the last 5 years being absolutely standard tool. Imagine how it would be for us to live without mobile phone. I don't know, it would be complex. It's standards, it's almost everywhere. People could connect easily, right? So it is, and it will continue to be so. A lot of people, majority of people will connect through that. So this globalized world with global company, being able, look at which today, I was very striking, and just give you an anecdote, I the other day met Cristiano Ronaldo. Are you aware? Yes. Real Madrid, I hope, do we have Real Madrid fan here? Or Barcelona? You're more Barcelona? Yeah, yes, okay, good, good. Okay, but I had to meet, let's say, it was an obligation. I prefer Messi, but okay, it happens. You know? So I meet Cristiano Ronaldo, and I was preparing myself, and I was looking at his tweet. And just 1 hour before I met him, he sent a tweet to say good morning. Really? You know, it's a photo of him in his beautiful car, Bentley, and he says good morning. Really? And I looked, 85,000 retweet. Good morning. And myself, I'm trying to tweet very seriously. If I have 10, I found, wow, you know? So it gives you a bit of but what I'm saying by that is Ronaldo, Messi, they are global figures. When I'm traveling, not only people have mobile, they have all the shirts of Real Madrid, of of Barcelona, everywhere in the world. There is no country where little boys, but also little girls these days. So the marketing is very influential. So we are in a very globalized world with global figures like that, very strong. Which means people, their experience is also a cross-border, and it's the same experience. Right? When you go in China, people, they want to drive BMW and Audi. And they don't want, by the way, to drive the BMW Audi built in China. No, no. They want to be able to drive the same Audi that the one are built in Germany. It's interesting. So the experience, the global experience is there. So global world, and it will continue to be so. Right? But at the same time, incredibly fragmented. Incredibly fragmented. Today, and you all know in all society, you have between 15 to 20% of people which are out of the system. Not employed, very poor, not connected. There's very vulnerable people, not only out there, but in our society. Think about prisoners around the world. Who cares about prisoners? Who support them? Who connect with them? Nobody. So you have society very fragmented. But also fragmentation means also within government. It's finished the time where you would speak to one government, one entry point, and this person will talk and on behalf and engage the government. Maybe the president, yeah, maybe. Even there, it's not easy. When you talk to the European Union, I can tell you, I don't know one country who agrees to be represented by the European Union, or maybe Sweden, it's the only one, I think. But the only one, right? But that's interesting. So today, when you are negotiating anything, even on behalf of the European Union or African Union, I don't think that there is any country who feels represented anymore. Right? It's also the same reality in our own movement. It's tough to be the federation. Can I say that as being the Director General of the ICRC? Right? It's tough to represent together, where it's fragmented, where people feel also that they want to be part of the table, that they have the right, they quickly. And I feel that very deeply. And just the fragmentation, the last comment is, look at what happens in Tunisia, Egypt, Syria. Look at all this revolution. Whatever the outcome, all this revolution started without leader. We should learn from that. There was no Nelson Mandela. There was not one group who said, okay, now it's finished, let's take over. It was people. That's why it was not possible for the state to stop it. It was just people, very fragmented again. Educated people, young people, connected very quickly, deciding themselves. So for us, we have to take into account these different features because it's changing the experience that people have about their life, their request, their suffering, and what they expect also from us. That's a critical element for me, very critical. Last but not least, before coming to us, I think the other issues I see is right now in the world, not everywhere, but in general, if I look at trends, I think there is also a larger gap between what I would call humanitarian needs of the people and the response of the official humanitarian. And by the way, I consider all of us as the official actors doing humanitarian work. We are recognized, we're not always perfect, but we have structures, we have identity. But are you aware, and you know that very well in Somalia, for example, right? But in Syria also, that the remittance, for example, from the diasporas, the fact that also families goes and help their people directly, the business, but also sometimes the dark business, all that brings much more help in a country than what we can bring ourselves. So the informal part of humanitarian is there, right? So in a way, when we look at Syria, when we look at Iraq, when we look at Somalia, and you look at the gap between the needs and what we, as a formal sector, can do, this gap sometimes is rather enormous. And we have to be aware that we are moving in a world where informal humanitarian aid, maybe not called humanitarian aid, is also there. So we need to capture that. In Somalia, I would say today, and correct me if I'm wrong, the diaspora has played a critical role over the last decades, right? In terms of being able to bring money into it. If I look at Syria, of course, it's a very different aid because it's an aid directly to the families, maybe not impartial, so to one community, but it's there. So the gap, the fact also that you have this pressure on people and the weight is bringing is very important. Last but not least, in terms of aid, the famous questions between development and human aid. I found, and this is one of the challenges we'll have, is our boxes. The way we are trying to define what we're doing are less and less relevant. When emergencies start in South Sudan, when is it finishing? When, even in Nepal, when you have an earthquake, it's happening in Nepal. You have to integrate from day one the questions of the systems. Very weak system, which has been shaken by the war, shaken by the lack of investment. We know that, by issues of governance. We know that when you are thinking about Somalia, Yemen, you have to integrate the fact that it's long-lasting, protracted conflict with systems which are under shock. Look at Ebola. You know it very well. In countries which already have been seriously shaken by what happened to them. So the idea that you have a perfect separation between development and humanitarian affairs, that you have a continuum, this is totally unrealistic and doesn't correspond at all to the reality of the people. The people, they have multiple pressure on them. You are poor, at the same time there is violence. You live in a country very fragile and at the same time at war. You have a reality of maybe a natural disaster or climate change in a situation of violence and economic crisis. Which means that the way we are absorbing and bringing that and trying to respond needs to change. If we continue to just look at specificities in terms of situation or pure, I would say, development, humanitarian affairs, we will have a serious issue, all of us. And here I'm not talking Red Cross, Red Crescent. I'm talking about the architecture of the formal humanitarian and development aid. The third thing I think what we should do in terms of way forward is a good mixture between tradition and innovation. We, and here it's a we collective, we Red Cross, we Red Crescent, we Federation, we ICRC. We have very strong tradition, and this tradition needs to be reinforced, very clearly. And I would at least put two things on the table. The first one, the famous one, but fundamental for me, is a principled approach. The fact that we have a principled approach, and that we understand what it is and we're living it, is essential because it allows us to have a similar one language. It's a language that we do understand and we can demonstrate, and at the same time be fundamentally diverse. And this is the power of us. Because most likely, we will have to be diverse in order to be able to respond to local communities, to different situations, different culture, in a world which will be globalized but also fragmented. But then you have to have a response which is based on the same core value. And the principle for that are fundamental. And they're not Christian, they're not Muslim, they're not Jewish, they're not Buddhist, they're not from the West, from the South. I don't think so at all. Impartiality, independence, humanity, neutrality is really something that we own. You own. We own all. And that's something which I think is very fundamental. We just have to be ready to demonstrate it every day. And we have to be ready that if one of us fails, the price will be for everybody. I can tell you, I can see how complex right now it is to discuss and engage a group as difficult like Islamic State. It's extraordinarily difficult. But I can see also that for them, the reference is not what we do or not in Iraq right now, it's what is happening in Yemen. I don't know why, but that's the reality. So what our colleagues are able to do or not in Sada right now is very important for Islamic State. Not for everybody, but some of the people. Our own ability to manage smartly, together with the Iraqi Red Crescent, for example, water program will make a hell of a difference. So you can see immediately the interconnections. And we know that. But this language and the fact that we are able to formulate and to live it is something fundamental. That's one. The second point, and here, frankly, on that one, coordination, tools, that's not a problem. Here it's making sure that each of us in our society, in our organization, we are serious about that. That's one of it. And that's okay. We can do better, it's not bad. The second issue for me is proximity. Human proximity. And that might be the biggest challenge. I'm of the opinion that the next coming years, it's already the case, but it will be even more important. We will have to maintain a close proximity to communities and to people affected by war, by crisis, by economic problems, violence, natural disaster. We will have to maintain close proximity. And here, I would like to insist, human proximity. Why? For two reasons. Why? Because these people, first, and you know that very well, they have opinion. They don't want anymore a humanitarian response which is just thrown at them. Even people who are vulnerable, what they want is a humanitarian response which makes sense, which integrate their coping mechanism. People are resilient. Without us, they know how to do it. So how do we capture that? How do we connect with that? How do we propose something which makes sense? And the reality is, what makes sense can change and evolve, which is difficult for us because it means it is putting our standards under pressure. Because most likely you will not be able to just develop a response from Nairobi to very special places, or even from Geneva or whatever. I don't think so, less and less. So how are we equipped to contextualize our response? And our response, as you know also over the last few years, is not just a physical response. This time is over. It's also mental, as an example. You know? How do we, education. So how do we bring this? This is something critical. So be close to people for me is absolutely fundamental in order to be relevant. Assess the needs, be with them, try to find. Otherwise, my sense is we'll be more and more rejected by people. They will just not let us access to them. Because they'll be fed up. Maybe accept from time to time. When I look already sometimes when you go in slums or when you go in places difficult, you look at young people, they are polarized, they're not sure what is their futures, what do you represent. So if you're not able to connect with them, to be closely related, in a very fragmented world where these young people are not impressed by their parents anymore, and by the community, you need to understand to be close to them. The other element about being close proximity for me is it's the only way, and you know that very well here in Kenya, but we know that everywhere. It's the only way to build legitimacy, to engage the famous all stakeholders, which make sense, which influence the people. It's the only way you can engage government, local authorities, but also the famous non-state armed groups who control people. Be it political, but also criminal. And we, as a movement, we have the responsibility to engage, discuss with the people, including the most difficult one. When it comes about humanitarian affairs, when it comes about international humanitarian law, we need to be able to do that. And to do that is not because you're the Red Cross, the ICRC, the Federation, or Red Crescent, that you have a legitimacy. I don't think so. It's because of our history, it's true, our practice, but it's also because we are in close proximity, because we know the people. So close proximity is essential. I can see in Middle East right now, if I look at Yemen again, the fact that you have a close proximity of my own organization and the Yemeni Red Crescent, but also of my own organization, ICRC, together with different status, different mandate, makes it a lot of strength. Allow us to talk to people. That really is an interesting one, and I think it's critical if we want to be engaged. Otherwise, there is a real risk that more and more, in a world where you will have separation between poor people or between small country, fragile country, extreme poverty, where the international community will not be there. Because look what is impressive. The last crisis, with the exception of Nepal, Yemen, Libya, Mali, South Sudan, quite a bit, not all, Somalia, if I look at it. The UN, so powerful, not able to intervene within the crisis, around the crisis, helping, but not within. And I'm not saying it's good, bad, it's a bad news. I found it bad news. So it means pressure on us, ability to really go there is absolutely central. So that's would be for my, and here it means possibly, if you ask me, a possibly element around rebalancing the risk. And this is now part of innovation. we will have to, and it's already the case, we will have to think about how we manage risk in organizations like the Kenyan Red Cross, but also the ICRC, Federation, Red Cross, Red Crescent. How do we do that smartly? And the risk is not just the physical risk, it's also finance. Are we ready to take a bit more risk? Are we able to sometimes go and be a bit more bold about trying to find the right supports? Are we able to do the last mile to also, in terms of humanitarian diplomacy, just push what it is? I think we will have to look carefully about how do we balance the risk. And so far, we have a responsibility also at top management to make sure that we do not just push the risk down, just to our partner or to our volunteers. How do we train them? How do we make sure that there is a good understanding? And we, as an organizational model, back to that, we have to make sure that devolution of responsibilities at the center. We cannot, in a world fragmented, just centralize risk management, centralize resource mobilization only. You have to think about how do we allow our team to possibly engage our organization on the spot, knowing that people will not allow them to do huge assessment and go back and ask. Engage directly, have the necessary means to be able to do that. And this is very true in the Kenyan Red Cross, as in my own organization, doing different moments at different level. Very critical. So if you come back to collaboration and coordination, whatever we build needs to be able to help us to do that. Because now if we build something very centralized, very heavy, it will not help us to do what I'm just saying now. So whatever we build needs to help us to move in that direction. So to make a long story short, in terms of coordination, collaboration, I am of the opinion that or we find new solution over the next coming 3 years, or new solution will find us. Right? Which means battle will be imposed to us because of the environment. We won't have choice. A, because of money. Pressure is enormous. If I look at my organization, if I look at your organization, we know that. Competition between organizations is heavy, and we just have seen the beginning. We're much heavier. Competition between us is heavy also. So that's something which it will change. Whatever we do, we'll have to find solution. That's very clear. Second, human being, people, competences. I'm of the opinion that, again, if we have to work in close proximity to population, we will have to bring expertise, competences. None of us, including my own organization, will have all the competences we need. We will have to build on competences that are not just in one organization. It's impossible. It's an impossible task. So we'll have to think how do we build center of excellences, competencies that we can use, and not use the way we use it right now, which is a heavy way. Much more flexible, much more fluid. And here, frankly, I don't know how to do it. It's complicated. No, really, I don't know. We are not equipped. We are heavy, right? Not the Kenyan Red Cross, but the ICS. You're light, I can see it. No, but it's an issue. How do we manage centers, also people, organization? But it is central for me. Being able to build on center of excellence and being able to look into that. So in terms of scenario, what are the options? First, and to calm down immediately your enthusiasm. First, the result of the international conference and the Council of Delegates will be disappointing about the coordination. Yeah, sorry about that, right? Why? Because it's a long process and it's a bit of old process, if I may be honest with you, right? My sense is, it's also a question of leadership. My sense is you start to have also leadership and also a sense of emergency. It seems very clearly for me that you start to see an evolution within the Red Cross, Red Crescent. You start to see that with my organization, but with your organization also, where we want to find solutions, but we have to be very careful. We have to find solutions which allow each of us to be at its best. Not each against much. It's not an or, it's an and. I'm of a person who thinks that there is a space for a strong federation, but who needs to think itself differently. Who needs to be well financed. I think there is a very important role to play for a federation, for example, but not half-half. And not only ICRC, but also members of the federation. But a federation which today would do things that none of us can do. Integrity questions are central. What will happen in our red network will affect us all. Education, leadership is central. Evaluation, quality control, central. You could have absolutely a very strong Federation would do that work for us. But then we have to agree, that's the focus. That's where the money is. We are ready to invest. We could have a center who does really strongly capacity building, much more seriously than what we do. Coordinate that very strongly. You could decide as an organization like ICRC, we said by theme, yes, capacity building, we are happy. It's not us. It's one of the centers who does that very well. But, according to our plan, according to performance management, we agree about the quality we want. Join us, do that. It's absolutely possible. So what will happen, you will have thematic also. You will have center of expertise. And I hope we'll have several. We'll have absolutely to have center of expertise when it comes to volunteerism. More and more I see that creating training volunteers is essential and is not a long-term solution. You have to do that including in crisis. How do you train, form, manage volunteerism in crisis? So that needs to happen. So we will have to look around these kind of questions. So it's the end is central for me. Right? That's central. So that's an option. And if the options, it will happen rather soon. You will have also a discussion about corporate service, I'm convinced. We cannot have several logistics for all of us. We cannot have several HR systems for all of us. We cannot have all AT systems for all of us. I think we will have to think about that. No discussion. It sounds strange, heavy, but that's what will happen. Now the question is when? In a year, 2, 5 years, when we are under pressure? But it will happen. I have just no doubt on that one. What I would really carefully say is, my sense is I will continue to claim it's extremely important that we have different identity. That's great. We have one strong identity, which is the Red Cross, Red Crescent, but it's great that we have different mandates. It's great that we have different culture. Very powerful. In a world which will require different culture to respond, different modalities, but then one language, which is clearly the language of the principle. Last but not least, Aisha, the real question, as always, the real question is about money. Right? And if there's one thing we have to look at carefully in terms of collaboration, is how do we share money? How do we share resources? And here, frankly, on that one, and I must recognize, we have not found the solutions at the leadership level so far. And I'll try to explain you why. And maybe you have some solutions around the table, that would be good. Explain you why. There's two reasons. One, I think we in a movement, with all the plus and the minus, we are still organized around territory. Forget the ICRC for a minute and the Federation. But if you look in general, Red Cross, Red Crescent, you are organized around territory. By the way, if I know, sometimes you even have fighting between branches and the center, right? No, not in Kenya, no, but in some delegations, I've seen that happening, right? So it's interesting when you discuss with leadership of a national society, you hear quickly that there is also tensions with their branches, especially when it comes to fundraising. Not only, but also fundraising. Branches, frankly, the center can stay there. I'll do my own fundraising. Thank you very much. And don't come in my garden. I know how to do it. It's very powerful in terms of managing the response. It's true, because you're closely connected to the company. But it's dramatic when it comes to resource mobilization. Because, of course, you lose opportunity. You're never at the right level. You constantly go for what is available there, which is important, but you never see the big picture. And we, as a Red Cross, Red Crescent, we have remarkably failed over the last 10 years to get the big share of the cake. Let's be frank, as a collective. If I look at my organization, I can say, well done, in terms of budget, you've done well, ICRC, but if I look then specifically collectively, are you aware that collectively, that's the figures of the Federation, if I'm not mistaken, collectively, if we take all Red Cross, Red Crescent, I'm careful about budget, but it's $35 billion on a yearly basis. This is enormous. 35 billion, but what do we do with it? How do we, if you think a little bit like that, so there is something about how do we coordinate in terms of resource mobilization, and we have not found the trick, because I think there is competition, because we feel that to put the flag of each of us is very important, right? So still, and having different identity again something important. But I also see, and here I really see not only PNS, I see also new ONS willing to have their own flag everywhere. Making sure that people understand this is this Red Cross and not this one. This is something which I know is complicated, and we will be able to change that only if we're able to get more money. That's for sure. If we will not get more money, it will continue to be very competitive. And so far, We have not found the solution. And if there is one place where you need to focus us, globally at the leadership, because that could be only at leadership level, that has to be discussed globally. We have to agree on a repartition of key, how a big crisis, how does it happen? How do we manage that? How do we manage the fact that we are diverse, but also that we want to discuss with the big donors at once, not that how do we make sure that when we are financed by the UN, for example, it's smartly managed and not just each of us trying to find a way and then being really only used as an implementing agency with all the problems. So if there is one critical issue, that's the one. And if we don't find a solution in the next 2 or 3 years, I can tell you, then it will be very difficult. So I don't want to come, I can see my colleagues are completely stunned, say what the hell is he talking about? But I want to be also honest about what are the real issues. On the rest, I'm at ease. I think the world will lead us in the right direction. I think we have improved a lot, let's be honest. But it will be first and foremost about the means we will be able to gather in order to be able to really do the difference. That's what will help us. Otherwise, competition will continue to be very, very fierce among ourselves. And I'm rather optimistic if I look at leadership. We will have to find a solution and it will happen, but that is around the question. There are people out there who would accept our principle. I'm not sure about that. This is an assumption. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure that people, some people would, let's say if we claim that, or if we expect the people to be impressed, or, I'm not sure about that. I think that it will challenge us. The question I would say, what is for me absolutely central, is we have to be in a position not to lecture the people about our value or about our principle. You have to be very careful. We don't have to ask the people to abide by it always, no? But if we are ready to demonstrate it, this is what I found interesting. And ready to take the right risk, I think that's what it is. And the weak chain for me is not only, you know what is the weak chain? Is if we have society, and I'm a bit critical also to some national societies, who are not able to look at what the vulnerability are at home, who are not able to change also, talking about. As a good example, can I just use one good example which has struck me? There's several. But one good example was with the Spanish Red Cross. Is somebody from the Spanish Red Cross? Nobody, so I can say whatever I want. No, but really interesting. The Spanish Red Cross, we all remember, were very international, very pushy to go internationally. That was their structure, their strategy. Spain went through and still going through a major crisis. The level of vulnerability has changed dramatically in Spain, really. Poverty, really. Middle class being suddenly really affected. A lot of young people. If you look in Spain, the numbers of people who are migrating again, it's amazing. They're back to the 20th century beginning. What did the Spanish Red Cross? Took them time, but they completely changed their programming. Totally. They took the risk to, in fact, re-engineer a different relationship with people. They took the risk also to, in fact, find money, not based anymore on international, which always only brings money, but to try to raise money on behalf of the people in Spain. Difficult, complex, because it's different type of competencies you have to bring. I would argue today, wow, they have done a very long way. Being the turn in 3 years, complicated, that's what I consider what I would expect. So it's not just, abide by principle and put your hands on Henri Dunant's figures, but it's a bit more than that. So being able to demonstrate, but also be able to understand what's happening also in your own society. I'm expecting national society, first and foremost, to take the risk to be good and close connections with the vulnerability at home before moving immediately outside. That makes a hell of a difference. Because I can tell you, what will happen is you will have less and less people be interested to young people, to people unemployed, to volunteer, to all these people. And we have to find solutions in a world where it's true, it seems, at least over the next coming years, the economic situation, but also the dynamic in which we will have, depending on the country, and here I'm talking including the north, we will have 15, 20, 25% of the population outside the grid. I need national societies also be interested about migrants in the host country, but also in the country who are receiving it. So that's what I would consider. So it's not just claiming, but an agreed, and maybe also have a chance that we are able to discuss that among us. That we don't spend, when we talk about coordination, only discussions about international. Why on earth? International in terms of budget represent only 3 billion out of 35. Why do we spend all our energy talking about international cooperation and not what we do or not at home? I would be very interested to discuss a bit more. What are you doing at home? You know, what are you doing at home? And here, it's easy to say that because I found, if I may say, Kenyan Red Cross, that you're doing a great job. But you improved, you changed, you fought for that, right? So, be honest, there are a lot of society around you, around it, not doing a great job at home. A lot of society in Europe are not doing a great job at home. A lot of society in Asia are very far, in the Middle East, far from what they should be able to do. So that's what we should be able to do first. And we should have this discussion, and we should learn from what has happened in Somalia, in Kenya, and maybe agree that it could influence also the practice in Europe and other places. So that's central for me. If we're not able to do that, that will be very difficult. If we continue to be perceived as an organization, as a collective, which is just interested to move and to go where the crises are, and not being able to look at home, I think it will be very difficult. That was my first, I hope. On your questions, which I think was rather complex questions, in terms of governance and how can we what is our role right now? I think first we should be humble. Really. I mean, there are questions which will not be solved by us. So, politics have a role to play. South Sudan will not be solved by us, whatever we do. It needs to be solved by the politicians, by the parties. China, the US, they need to wake up. They need to put pressure on Ethiopia. They need to find solutions. I know it's complicated. We can discuss for a long time, and if it doesn't happen, it won't be it's not in our, let's say, possibilities. Real. Look at Syria. Look at Middle East. We have to agree and be humble, but also stubborn at the same time. Knowing what we can do. We should be careful not to start to say humanitarian will resolve all the problems. No. But then we can still do something, and it's important. And what we can do, then we should fight for it and be stubborn. And it links me to humanitarian diplomacy. I think there is two ways to do humanitarian diplomacy collectively. There is plenty of it, let's say. One is we should agree about 1 or 2 or 3 themes that together we want to push. Each of us, we have other themes and it's fine. And these themes are always about the same issues. It's about dignity. It's about human dignity in the worst situation. And we can choose. Right now, for example, there is one thing which is very close to my heart, which I think should be close to all of heart. It's healthcare in danger. The fact that in South Sudan, the fact that in Syria, but also the fact that even in Kenya, other places, hospitals, healthcare centers are the first target, systematically, that health workers are not understood, not respected, that ambulances cannot travel, cannot go. This is dramatic, really. We should have a conversation with the young people, with the people about that. We should make sure that people feel deeply this is about them too. You know, because if healthcare, which really for me is, and not only the Red Cross question, are not respected in all situations, this is the end for me. I mean, this is normally what we agree. This is why Henri Dunant and why we're born, right? But not only us. This is really at the base. So what I would be happy is that we connect, we find our energy around 1 or 2 themes, and on the rest we can do humanitarian diplomacy, right? As the way. And we have to push it. And here on healthcare in danger, there is no limit. We can go for it because we know it. We are on the spot. We see it. It's about health. It's about people. It's about dignity. We know it's about humanity. It's about IHL. It's about protection. I mean, we have the expertise to do that. But, and here you're right, we have to be careful. We, again, as a collective, we're not strong enough. You have to bring in professionals, other organizations like MSF and others. You have also to have a conversation with young people. Absolutely fundamental. That, I don't know if it gives you, that's one element. The second element for me is, I don't know if it answers your questions, but we are moving in a world which will again be very polarized. Very polarized. I was in Iraq recently and I was surprised. I was discussing with also colleagues from the Iraqi Red Crescent, and I realized with the same education and us around the room, how much for them, again, they thought that they were cornered into being a Shia or a Sunni. That their identity, this identity was thrown to them almost by the situation. And it was very difficult to get out of this situation in a very polarized environment. When you start to ask yourself, from which religion are you? This is a very, and it will continue to be like that. I think we are moving in a very polarized world. What we can do, and this is very powerful in terms of humanitarian diplomacy, is really to make sure that in terms of actions and what we do and then the way we talk also, we really go for humanity and make sure that we want really to make sure that whatever we respond, we respond across the communities. That our volunteers, our teams are across communities. We might be the only ones to be able to do that at the time. And this is very changed. We also have this cross and the risk sometimes heavy to wear.
In fact, re-engineer
give them
a different relationship.
The human sense in a very polarized.
It took the risk also
very
to, in fact,
it looks small.
It's already not based anymore on international.
On the news, very quickly.
Raise money.
I don't know.
To try to raise money.
I think it's a complex one. I don't think it's about structure. I don't think it's about complex. It's about program, but I think it's to have it many agree that they have a different way to discuss things, different way to influence. I think we need to, it's maybe the first time in terms of generation, and
so it's not just abide by principles and put your
the first time ever
hands on that
it's possible that there's such difference in experience between generations.
Demonstrate and also be able to
you might have to think about having very young people heading on.
I'm expecting national society first,
not waiting.
To think the first time would be good
ever.
And close connections with.
Which means my generation will have to be, and it's something really. I'm not only in the Red Cross representative. I'm hearing that in other places people start to think there is maybe such a gap in terms of world connections, understanding that we might, and maybe it's not one or the other, but at least end having very young people at the leadership level, not instead of the old guys like me, but with old guys like me, right? That would be the good idea. And B, the question is not only young, it's also about women. Critical. We are moving in a world where being gender balance is fundamental. Not just for the sake of the organization, because it's nice, because it's so much better in terms of performance. Absolutely. Connects you in again very globalized world, very divided environment. Connect you with women. One thing I've learned, kind of just an anecdote, and it has really changed my vision. When I was working in Yemen in the 90s, the message I got from my colleagues was you cannot have women delegates. No, impossible. On the north, only men can do it. And it would be good in organization if I look at the future, it's good to have a bit more of that, if I may say. On the proximity, I'm sorry, I'm trying to do as best as I can. On the close proximity and the time, I don't know if it's a very good question. I don't know if it's a time you can decide how far you can go. But I think my experience, I'll give you my experience from the ICRC perspective, but then I will connect with the Kenyan Red Cross perspective. At the ICRC, what has changed over the last 10 years is we do not leave country anymore. The time that you would imagine where you would, like a fire brigade, there's a crisis, you come, happens, and then you leave. This time is over. This time is over. Most of the time, you have to stay to establish connections, understand what's happening, see what are the needs. And then you might deploy a little bit. So what I'm saying is, it's found difficult to imagine that you will not maintain always a close proximity. Maybe it's not full-fledged, but you will have to maintain understanding, connections with the communities, with the people, with the authorities also, with the country. Knowing that we are in a work that you cannot impose to people. We cannot impose humanitarian aid to people. We have to negotiate it. So they need to understand, and we need to understand them. So maybe it's not constantly full-fledged, but the idea that you will leave and then hoping that they will welcome you is something which I found difficult. Now I know we cannot do it everywhere. We have to make some selections and choices. And here I connect with you. You can also have programs which deliver proximity in a way. I would argue, first aid program, ambulances program, deliver proximity, deliver quality, but also in very close proximity. You don't have to stay with people constantly, but you are delivering a service which will come to the people. There is something we have to think about also. How do you deliver? How do you create proximity? And here I would like to insist in a world where proximity is also created through social media and Skype. And that's good. But I'm talking about human proximity. Presence. The last element was about, there was a lot of them. Managing volunteerism in crisis. I don't know if there is so much good experience. Can I just share one thing? I'm sure some colleagues have it. one thing is what I've seen in terms of managing volunteers in crisis is I've seen that in the time where you would build program capacity or strengthening capacity to help and coach in terms of volunteering program and hoping it will work is possibly not the right program. What I found interesting is most likely you will attract volunteers in times of crisis. And you need to build the organization or your volunteers also in time of crisis. How do you do that? Now, I don't know if it's the best practice, but I've been struck by what I've seen in Syria. Really, very complicated, very difficult. But being able, with at the beginning, a very small society, very little paid staff, not that many volunteers. And with the plus and the minus, I'm not saying perfect at all, but willing, trying to attract people during the war. You have to, during crisis, you cannot wait and then say, okay, when the war is finished, I'll do a volunteer program, and then it'll be ready for the next war. During the crisis, and how do you ensure, in a very, very, very polarized world, the fact that your volunteers also understand, abide by the principle within each community. And I think we should watch carefully what has happened in Syria and how we have done that. And here it was not in ICRC, plenty of other society trying. Again, the way we're doing, I would say what I'm lacking in terms of coordination, we should be a little bit more strategic and organize a bit more the way we do that. But we could. I'm really convinced. I think we, as a collective, we should be the best in the world about volunteerism. We should have the best expert, the best school. And we are not. Some of you are, but again, scattered. It's what I'm talking about. My vision would be to have 1 or 2 centers of expertise on volunteers, really. That we should show. And there are organizations out there who are very powerful in the way they use volunteers, the way they accompany it. And I would argue that in some society, I've seen also a very powerful way to do that. But it's not really applied and not really replicated. Here we could do better. But volunteerism in crisis is something which I think, and here I'm not talking about ICRC, we have no expertise. I'm talking about maybe other society, the Federation, who could bring that and making sure it happens. The last answer was about tradition innovation. If I understand well what you were asking is, is there a balance between the two, or is it one against the other, and how do we do that? It's a very good question. I think but this is my deep intuition, is I think we are moving in a time where you have absolutely to work with and. Not tradition or innovation. It's tradition and innovation. And I know that and is very difficult. It's very complicated. But let me try to say it like that. I found that we, the Red Cross, Red Crescent, all of us, we are rather innovative. Yeah, I think we are innovative globally. If you look at your organization 10 years ago, it's a different organization today. Right? If you look at ICRC, it's a different organization. And why are we different? Most likely because we are working close proximity with people and we had to adapt the response. We had to also manage constraint in terms of access, security, resource, support. And in a way, through that, we have adapted our response. The problem is we are in a world where adapting needs to happen more quickly. People expect adaptation quickly. If I look at my own organization, to take you one example, it took us 7 years, 6 to 7 years, to adapt between the first kind of discussions and to have that in the program. As an example, you know that ICRC focus on family reunion and missing. We really had issues about missing, and on missing it took us quite a while to start to say, we should do forensic services. Because people would say, you have to help us. It's nice to bring messages and whatever. It's not enough. Bring DNA, help us. And we said, no, sorry, that's not. There's other organizations can do that. Absolutely clear. Why would we? It's too expensive, too complex, we'll never do it. But people put us under pressure. Again and again. They said, there's nobody else. Come, you're in close proximity, be with us. Today, in the ICRC, you have possibly the best forensic service ever in the humanitarian world. Fantastic. And me as a director general, if somebody would tell me, when I came in, Yves, among all things, would you go for forensic? I would say, no way, it's too, why forensic in the ICRC? It's just that we have too much already. I will never manage that. So the way we're able to adapt, but it takes us years. That's the problem. And in a world which will change, look at health, and you know that the health. I am of the opinion that the health sector will change dramatically over the next few years, but dramatically, and it will really impact us. Have you seen, for example, the iWatch? Does it mean something for you? Would have somebody have an iWatch? You're the first one I will see. Okay, you're aware, right? iPhone, Apple again doing something new. And it's interesting about Apple, if I just say Apple, one thing you have to learn is They pretend it's a phone, but it's not a phone. Right? iPhone, it's not serving anything but a phone. You know, you have everything, it's a small company. Now they have an iWatch. And what is interesting about the iWatch, I don't have it, but I've checked carefully. Don't look here on the iWatch, but you will have to look behind the iWatch. The response is behind it. Why? They have 6 sensors, and they have developed a program around that. So far they don't use it, but they will use it. And the sensor, what they will do, they will start, of course, to first measure the beat. You have that already. Say, okay, be careful, do a bit more exercise. But they will also measuring the sweat, right? The sweat, how do you say it? The sweat. Yeah, thank you. They would say, it's a bit too salty, it's a bit careful, or too sugar, okay? And they have a series of monitoring, it's already there. And what they will do, they will first give you have that already, they will start to give you some feedback about you know, as a person, you know, your health, you know, every day. Typically, right now, they will normally tell you, move out this room very quickly, it's too long, and there is not enough oxygen, right? They will tell you that. But then you can still decide, but they will start to do that, right? In terms of health and whatever. I'm serious about it. And what will happen is not only you as a person, but at the same time, all these data will be managed by algorithm. Which means insurance, for example, will have real-time vision about what will happen for population. Very specific, of course. Fantastic. And I can predict you already that Google, that you know very well as an organization, work in communication, internet, whatever, in 5 years' time, they will be #1 on the health sector. The biggest. I can predict you. I might be wrong, but I think that's what happens. So what it means what? It means our own experience around the world about health will change dramatically. The way we connect, the way things are, the way monitoring happens. And we as an organization, we ICRC, we Red Cross, we Red Crescent, we Federation, or we collectively, we are not equipped to be able to build to cope with this speed. And this is where innovation is interesting. Because you connect with not only us, but you connect with people who are really thinking differently in different domains. But you don't connect and ask them to help you. No. What you connect for knowledge. And knowledge will be more important than ever. You connect to really have the knowledge. That they will share with you the knowledge the moment it happens. In order to be able then to transform very quickly ourselves. So when we will have to adapt ourselves, it will not just be us. We will have to connect in that way. To give you an answer. So yes, traditional innovation will be there. And last but not least, traditional innovation is also the way we organize. I am convinced that as an organization, it's not a surprise, we will have to think differently than through silo. And we are all known as organizations, not the Kenyan Red Cross, I know you have no silo, again, but if I look at ICRC, we do have silo, right? And sometimes it works very well, but also sometimes it's difficult. So in the years to come, how are we, at the same time, are we able to manage 2 culture of management? One, very hierarchical, very vertical, when there is emergency. Yes. In emergency, you don't want everybody to discuss, do you think we have to go left or right, or yes, no, go, right? Of course, that's what you want, right? Very clear. But there's other moments where you, frankly, want to work differently. You want to connect, you want to know, you want to build solutions. And you will have to think laterally. We'll have to connect through different, and it's difficult, or in my own organization. So innovation will also be about the way we organize it, about leadership. And it's a challenging time. I don't know how it will happen. And it's not the only one. All organizations will be ready. I think the message of the iWatch is clear. It's too long. How do we manage a world where government in general wants to control more humanitarian affairs? This is possibly one of the biggest challenges. In a world where you have no international convergence, you will have more and more governments willing to control humanitarian action. That's very clear. Sovereignty of state is something which is very powerful right now. They don't want to have not only international organization, but also local organization, national organization doing what we want. So the challenge of maintaining a certain distance, being able to work in difficult area is something central, absolutely key for us. Now, how to do that? How do we bring that? I think it's again a collective, really country by country, engaging, but also at the international level. We have the International Red Cross Red Crescent Conference, good opportunity at the end of the year, again, to discuss with states on some of their responsibility. Not all over the place, but to try to really work on some issues which are very central. So I think this is something which, again, our collective, but again, not a collective where we want to absolutely be all together at the same table, but that we agree that in each country we do the work, and also internationally, and we play that. That's where we are strong. If you do a good work at the national level, at the local level, really at both levels, and then internationally you have the same message, but different people, smart, works well, this is where you can influence. And it's the best way. And thanks for all the work you're doing.